Hello everyone, my name is Amber. Welcome back to my channel, Amber Reads Romance. Today I am finally back with my weekly wrap-ups. This one is actually going to be a 2-week wrap-up. You may have seen in my January wrap-up video where I went over my top 5 books and stats and everything. I did mention, I think I did in that video, that I wasn't going to be doing a weekly wrap-up because I only really read like 4 books last week. The previous week, and I just didn't feel like filming a whole video. I had like the Immortals After Dark live to do, and I was just kind of done. So I just decided to postpone it. And so this is actually going to have some books that finished out January. So you might see some of those that were from my January wrap-up video. And then obviously it goes to February 8th. So I think this is from January 26th to the 8th. So I read 9 books, which isn't my best, but life happens, shit gets in the way, and whatever. I'm here. I'm here with my wrap-up finally, and I have a huge book to talk about too. That was kind of a big reason this last week I didn't get as much read. So anyways, all that to say, let's just get started with my weekly reads. Okay guys, so we're just going to get right to this. First, I want to mention that I had such a great time doing my Immortals After Dark live show. I was so nervous because my internet is always fails on these live shows. So luckily it worked. And a big thank you to Kim for, co-hosting that with me. I am so excited. It was very nerve-wracking because I just hadn't done one on my channel yet. So thank you to everybody that watched that. If you are still interested, you can still go and watch the live where we discuss the first 2 books. The one that was Warlord Once Forever and then In Hunger Like No Other. Now, I think this next week, I'm going to start reading the other couple ones. Hopefully I get to both of them. And then I'm not sure when that live show is going to be, but I'm thinking either the end of February or like right at the beginning of March. So make sure you reach out to me if you would want to be on the live. Make sure you reach out to me. I would love to have you. And make sure check out the Discord. I put stuff up there for if you want to read the books. You could jump in at any time. You don't have to start the whole series. If you want to just jump in, we would love to have you. So anyways, enough of that. Let's get started with my reads. So the first book that I have to talk about was an ALC that I got. This is Wild Bliss by Lexi Blake. This is the 14th book in this series. So this is Nights in Bliss, Colorado. It's the 14th one. I just saw the tropes and it was an ALC, I think with Valentine PR. And so I jumped in. This happens to me a lot. I tend to try new authors to me with ALCs because I feel like it's easier to give a new author a shot when you're listening to an audiobook for some reason. So I always like to try that. And then I'll jump in like way late in the series. So I don't know. I don't think this hurt at all. I think you could probably read any of these as a standalone, but I saw this was going to be kind of like a poly, like why choose kind of relationship. So I was for it. So in this we have Sawyer and Wyatt, and they are pretty much like brothers, but they're not brothers. Sawyer's a little bit older, and they used to be in the same MC, but they got out of that life. Wyatt was actually born into it. His father, I think, was the president, and he had to like fully get like the burn and all of that stuff to leave the MC. So he definitely has that dangerous past. They basically live together in Sawyer's kind of cabin up in the woods in this small town. And, Sawyer is the typical grumpy, asshole, broody hero. And Wyatt is like the sunshine. And then we have Sabrina. And Sabrina moved to town. She's looking for a fresh start. And she actually ends up starting a school. Like they didn't really have a good school in that town. They had to go kind of like outside the small town. And so she's a teacher, but she's also helping build up this new school there. She had a run-in with Sawyer like at the start, which he was kind of a dick to her, like a pretty big dick to her, but it was because he was attracted to her and he wanted to like push her away. And I think like a year passes and she ends up getting snowed in with Sawyer and Wyatt. Wyatt has been like crushing on her for a long time, but he's never really approached her. So he has major, like he's pining after Sabrina for sure. And she ends up going up to their place because one of them, I think, is like the landowner. of the place she's at, and I can't remember what, something was broken, and she's going out there to get them to fix it, and it ends up being like a pretty bad snowstorm happening, and so she gets snowed in for like the weekend with them. And basically Wyatt wants to explore things with her, and he is definitely down to do sharing, and they all come to an agreement to kind of have this fling for the weekend that they're snowed in together, and it gets very hot, very spicy. This is an erotic romance. It's all like spice, really. But basically they were going to kind of keep it for the weekend, but really Wyatt wants more. Sawyer's like, this is the only time I can do this. I'm not into relationships. And so Wyatt's like, well, I'm still going to go after her because I really want her. But they all decide to kind of date and come together. But also, Wyatt does have danger from his past MC coming back to them. So that will lead to like a suspense element in the book. So what I will say about this was, coming into the series, like in the 14th book, there's a lot of other couples brought up, and they are all in a poly relationship, which I just found that to be so kind of bonkers and unrealistic. But I also liked it in a way because really there's no angst or issues of them coming out as like this poly relationship because everybody in the town is doing it. But I did think it was kind of weird that everybody in the town is in this doing that. But whatever. That's the kind of series she was creating. So it didn't kill the book for me or anything. The one thing that I was really bummed about was this wasn't an MMF. I really wanted the guys to be getting it on as well. So that's kind of when I don't even know if I like love that kind of poly relationship because I feel like they're not fully all in a relationship together. They're just sharing her. I want the guys to be involved too. And so they're all like romantically involved. And you could tell that Sabrina kind of like wanted that, but it was just like brushed aside by the guys. So in my mind, eventually they're going to get there and the guys are going to be getting it on too. So I enjoyed this. It was an easy, fast listen. I did write it down. It was narrated by Lee Samuels and Kitty Bang. And so if you're looking for an erotic romance, if you want a series where they're all poly, that's what this series is. So I ended up giving this 4 stars and 4 chilies because there's definitely a lot of spice in this one. Okay, so then I read a wild one, and this was an arc for Psyop Kings by K. Webster. And, I'm always going to go request K. Webster's books. I love her. She's one of my favorites. And this one was crazy because I can't really call this a romance. It's more of like a psychological thriller, a mind F type of book. It is a trilogy. So, we're just kind of setting up the first book in this. So we're going to get to, probably the romance in the next 2 books. But this one was insane. Now, and I will say it leaves off on a cliffhanger. And, so if you don't want to wait, I totally understand. But it is a wild ride. So in this, we have Romy, and she is a college student. She comes from a very affluential family. She's very rich, has a powerful father, but she really wanted to get away to like live on her own and go to college. And she actually befriends a girl that's very shy and quiet, and they're become really good friends, but they're also in a project together. And all of a sudden, she's not showing up to class when she always did. She tries to go find her, and her roommate says she packed up and left. Like, all of a sudden, she's dropped classes, and she's just, like, doesn't buy it. She knows there's something fishy going on. And so she kind of goes, and she finds this pamphlet at her friend's for this, like, I forget what the corporation's called, but anyways. Oh, wait, hold on. This is called The Crown. This series is called The Crown Conspiracy. This is book 1. But it's like this Crown family has this company that like all of a sudden she has this pamphlet and it looks super shady. So she decides to look into it. And there's a party being held by the Crowns and everything, a well-to-do gala type of thing. And since she comes from money and her dad has a lot of connections, she gets an invite to it. And so she goes and kind of gets involved where she shouldn't, because she ends up getting kind of kicked out of the party because she's trying to like ask people about her friend. And one of those Crown brothers shows up to the bar and she ends up drinking a drink and getting drugged and waking up. It almost feels like in a coffin, but it was like this underground, under the floor type of thing. And she's being held. And when his brother, Caius, who's like the more methodical, he feels very psychopath. He's the one like in charge under his father in this family. He sees her, he's like, oh, what the fuck did you do? Because her dad has a lot of power and they can't just get rid of her. So what you learn, because she does get captive and she's held in this place where there's like all these like almost hotel rooms. She thinks they might own like a hotel or something, but all these rooms are like locked, and she's held in this room and she's trying to get escape. I'm explaining this so bad, but this Psyop thing is basically they, mind control, like mind F, use drugs to kind of, alter you and brainwash you and change you. And kind of, so that's like, and there's like this conspiracy that the government has this in place, that type of thing. That's kind of like where this came from. And so she knows they're trying to like brainwash her because they keep trying to drug her and then like pretend like Caius was her boyfriend, and she's just like, I ain't buying what you're selling, and she's fighting it all the way. And so Caius eventually is like, okay, well, you're gonna come stay with me, and she's his girlfriend. And so she's kind of in this just crazy situation with this family that's really like these three brothers that are crazy. She doesn't know who she can trust. She can't escape, but like also if she escapes, she's also trying to find her friend and what happened to her friend, because all of a sudden she sees like her friend all happy and like bubbly and perfectly put together kind of images. And she just knows shady shit is going down. Now, I will say that this book is so dark. It is very dark. There's a lot of triggering stuff in this. So I do want to mention that because there's something that happens at the end of this book that is really traumatic. And if you couldn't handle that, you may not want to pick this up. So I am going to bring up the trigger warnings in this. If you don't want to get it spoiled or anything like that, you can skip to the next book. But I think it's important to give you the triggers in this because there is on-page stuff that is very triggering. So again, this was fascinating. I couldn't put it down. I didn't know how I wanted to rate it because I didn't know how I felt about any of the characters. I did like Romy. I think she was really strong, intelligent. She's like really good with puzzles. So she's trying to like figure out everything going on. There's like shady people. It's just a lot going on. And so you are left through this book of like so many questions. So the cliffhanger happens and you're still like confused. And they're really like, she has an attraction to Caius, but he's not a good guy. She thinks there might be some good to him, but like they're just they have an attraction. So it's not really full romance yet. But I trust Kay Webster, and I think she's going to take us on a journey, and I can't wait to continue. So I'm going to bring up the triggers, but before I do, I will give you my rating. I did end up giving this 5 stars not because of like this amazing sweeping romance or amazing. It was fascinating. It hooked me. I couldn't put it down. I had tons of questions. It took me all over the place. It was crazy. So I decided to give it 5 stars. And then I think I only gave it like 2.5 chilies because they do kind of mess around a little bit, but the stuff that happens in this is it's just crazy. Anyways, I have to be kind of vague because I think you do kind of have to go in a little blind into this book. So I'm going to go over the triggers, so just be aware. All right, so there is a sexual assault of a main character on page. So I'm just bringing that up. That's one of the biggest triggers in this is it does happen on page. There's forced drugging, brainwashing, sex trafficking, crimes against children, death of a child, kidnapping, forced captivity, dubcon. I mean, it goes on and on. So Kay Webster lists those triggers too for you. So just be aware, she does list the triggers. Make sure you check them if you need to. But it was crazy. Okay, so then I read The Ever Queen. I listened to this on audiobook. This is the second part of the Everseas series. This finishes out Eric and Livia's romance. And this one, I really loved The Ever King. Like, I loved it. It hooked me. I loved the whole, fantasy pirates element. And at the end of that one, Livia actually gets taken. Her and, the Ever King are solid. Her and Eric are in love. They're together. Their relationship is good. It's just the action and what's going on in the fantasy world is what's like kind of left it as a cliffhanger. And I just didn't love this one as much. Like, I loved the first one. I gave it 5 stars, and this one just felt like it dragged. I wasn't fully like invested. Then all these other side characters were brought in, and it just, I was getting lost. It could have been me because I was kind of having a reading slump, you guys. Obviously, with the less books that I read, I'm kind of in a slumpy place. So it might have been me just not connecting to it. But I was also kind of just like, who is this character? Then the big villain was really set up good. It was a big shock of who it was at the end of the first book. And then his character just kind of fell flat for me. He didn't feel that powerful. He didn't feel that interesting. He was just kind of meh. And so it really bummed me out. So I was bummed, but I definitely do want to continue with the next one because the character is introduced in here that was very interesting. And I'm intrigued. But I just was kind of bummed because I thought this wasn't that great. It took a long time for them to get back together again. And then it was just, I don't know. And it felt very rushed at the end. So I ended up giving that one 3.5 stars and 3 chilies. Okay, so then I finally read it. It's been on my TBR forever, but I read The Wraith King. If you did see my January wrap-up, you will have seen that this was in my top books of the month. And I just really loved this. I love Juliette Cross, and I really thought she did a great job with the world building in this fantasy. And it wasn't too complex or confusing. That's my problem with fantasy. Sometimes I check out because it's just so much world building and different creatures and locations, and I just get lost in it. But this one was just very easy to follow. I thought it was I loved the characters. I could see this world and the different types of fae that we kind of have going on. And I can definitely see that it's going to be an amazing series. This is the first book in the Rise of Northgall series. And this had an interesting setup. We have, sorry, I'm trying to remember the names. We have Gol and Una. And Gol is actually Goloya, but they call him Gol the rest of the book, or Golaya, I think. I'm really bad at pronouncing fantasy names. But he is the Wraith King. But when we introduce him, he is actually being held prisoner by his father. He's held captive because there is this kind of foretelling or, whatever that he will kill his father and overtake the throne. So his dad basically imprisons him. And then we have Una, and she is part of the light fae, and she happened to be in their territory because she's trying to look into a cure, trying to find something that was located in their territory that could help this cure for this kind of plague that's going on around her people. Her father is sick and dying from it. And so she ends up getting captured by his father's men. And she's held captive there. She goes through a lot. She goes through a lot of trauma. But when she's there, she ends up getting rescued by him. He ends up getting some of the magical things limiting him, all of a sudden are failing. And so he's able to get out, and he saves her and gets her out of there. And so it's years later, and he is trying to build up his own people to an army to go after his dad. And he ends up doing that. He does show up and kill his father, and he becomes the Wraith King. She had been captured, I think, again at that point. And so he ends up going to her people too, to basically say, I will stop the war against your people, but you have to accept that he's going to be the leader. I'm the king, and I'm going to marry your daughter. Because he is also thinks that she is the one that is meant to bring his heir and help bring his people to be in power and everything. So it's kind of like a forced marriage a little bit. She doesn't really want to go into this, but she's willing to do whatever it takes to keep her, her own people safe, the light faith safe. And so she does agree to this marriage. And so now they are together, and there's an interesting ceremony she has to do for the night that they have sex, which was really crazy and creative, and I loved it. But they were just like have such an amazing connection. There's so much more going on in this world, obviously. I loved it because he actually has a dragon. So he's a dragon rider, and I'm just a sucker for a dragon rider. So I loved that. He is such like a cinnamon roll hero. He falls for her so hard, and he's willing to do whatever. They really come together. They communicate well. They work as a team. And there's so much more going on in this, but I don't want to say too much, but I did really love it. And I think the world building and the mix of the world building and fantasy elements along with the romance was a perfect balance for me. So I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. And I gave it 2.5 chilies. Okay, so now we are on to February reads now. So this is the first book that I read in February, and I was debating on whether I should talk about everything about it, because this is actually going to be our buddy read. That is going to be, for our buddy read. I think it's on the 21st or the 22nd. Sorry, I always forget to write it down when I go over this. But this is When Hearts Awaken by Victoria Loom. It's going to be on my channel. I just posted it recently. I forgot to post it on YouTube. I always post it on Instagram, and then I forget to put it in YouTube too. So just make sure you're following me on Instagram. I have my Instagram linked below. Also, I posted it on my Discord. So if you want to join the Discord, you can see any updates there too. Anyways, this is the 4th book in the Orchid series, and I am actually part of Victoria Loom's ARC team, so I am a little biased. I love Victoria Loom. I just discovered her last year, I think maybe the year before, but I read the last book in her first series for an ARC, and I just fell in love with it, so I need to go back to that series and finish it this year. But I can't believe that I don't think she's been writing maybe a few years. I'm not sure how long, but her writing is so good. She makes relatable, interesting characters. She writes billionaire romance, but literally she's got me to cry in 2 of her billionaire romances. It may just be a me thing. I don't know. I get emotional reading them. I just connect to the characters so much more. So I feel like she gives you a more of emotional punch with her billionaire romance than the typical author does. So anyways, I'm going to be biased on this. I was so excited that we were doing this one for our, buddy read. So since I was in the ARC team, I needed to read it first because it came out on the 5th, I believe. And I didn't want to totally give all my thoughts to you because I want you guys to watch the buddy show, but I want to rave about this book. So I'm just going to go into a little bit, but we'll see. I might ramble, who knows? But this was a 6-star read. I'm not going to bury that. I'm not going to bury the lead here. It was a 6-star read for me. It was so amazing. It was emotional. It was angsty. And let me tell you that I found a new book boyfriend. So this romance is between Charles Vaughn and Taylor. And Charles Vaughn is everything. He is so amazing. He is top book boyfriend material. I may have to be making an updated book boyfriend list video because he's on there. He's on there. I loved him. He made this a 6-star for me, but also Taylor did because she is such a complicated, strong, feisty heroine that has dealt with so much trauma. And just to see her fight for everything in her life and what she does to overcome that trauma, it was just very moving. And I thought she was really relatable. So let me kind of give you the gist of what this book is, because Taylor is a ballerina. And she actually, if you read the series, there's this Anderson family, and she found out recently, her and her sister grew up really poor, but they found out recently that their mom had an affair with the Anderson father, And so they actually just got kind of taken into that family. So while I'd say you can read this as a standalone, I think it's better if you read it in order too, because you'll know all these other side characters. It'll mean more to you. That's what I'm worried about, the other Jess, Jen, and Mandy, if they're not going to feel as connected because they haven't read the previous books. But anyways, so this has a lot of found family in that too, because the Anderson family is just amazing. So they've been taken in, and she is been working for her whole life to be a ballerina. She's trying to be like a solo ballerina, and she is up trying to push herself to do the role that she's always wanted to do, which was her mother took her to ballet when she was really young, and she just fell in love with the Black Swan. But really, she can be the Black Swan. She performs really well with that, but to be like the White Swan, she struggles with, because she has so much trauma that she just has a hard time bringing that joy and like love and all of that into that character. But she's trying to, move up in the ballet company, and that's what she wants to be. And then we have Charles Vaughn, and he is a friend of the Andersons. He is a billionaire. I think it was a bank. His family owned a bank, and now he's the CEO of that. But they are in hot water right now because I think it was the CFO. A bunch of women came out about sexual assault type of things, bad things that he's done. And so the company's looking pretty bad. So they kind of need to do some PR and help their company's image. And so he is going to be sponsoring her ballet for their the new Black Swan that they're going to be doing, their new tour and everything like that. And also doing a thing towards like sexual assault and awareness and all of that kind of stuff, that kind of campaign. So her and Charles had met years before, and they did not have a good meeting. They didn't like each other immediately. They both have misconceptions of the other. And so they're kind of holding on to that like wrong view. And they've just been very like hate each other. But they've ran in the same circles because he's a family friend of the Andersons. And she has a lot of issues with billionaires or like rich guys because of what happened to her. And she was sexually assaulted when she was 16. She was drugged and assaulted, and she kind of remembers like the face, but not fully. And people didn't believe her. She didn't really tell her family, her sister or whatever, but the police didn't really believe her. And so she just felt very traumatized by that whole event. And it was like these group of rich guys that did it. So she definitely does have her own stereotype negative views of these rich guys. So she kind of prejudged Charles, and he prejudged her because of different reasons. But now they're kind of forced in the same area because he's around the company a lot, helping out. And he's brought in his uncle, who is a ballet choreographer and big time in London, I believe. And he brings him over to do the choreography and head up this production. And so they're around each other a lot. And so they basically kind of butt heads until they start to get to know each other on a deeper level, until Charles sees what happened to her and learns what happened to her. And he is going to fight for his woman, and he falls hard. She really falls for him. He is like, touch her and you die. There's so many swoon worthy things that Charles does in this book. Like, because Taylor has this shell around her. She built up these walls after being assaulted. She has major PTSD and anxiety and just trust issues, and she's really cut herself off emotionally. So Charles has his work cut out for him to like get through to her, but just see her be vulnerable with him, and they have so many intimate, beautiful moments and conversations, and just to see them come together, it's just beautiful, and it really moved me. I think so many women have experienced what Taylor did, maybe not to that extent or whatever, but a lot of women have experienced that. So I think it's something it can be pretty traumatic to read, but it was very emotional for me. I felt very relatable of what, she kind of went through and how you handle that trauma after the fact. So I will bring up some triggers because there is a lot of triggering stuff considering she was assaulted and her PTSD and how she deals with that. But what I want to say is that Charles was amazing and he really fought for her. He does all these like little things where like he would send her daily messages of like the reason he's really into her or loves her. Even before he told her he loved her, he would do these reasons. And I mean, he just woos her and it's just so beautiful. Like, I just love him. Okay, so I wanted to check my triggers for you guys. So this may, I just want to give you guys triggers because it affected me emotionally because I just think it was such an emotional story. I loved their romance. It's very romantic. That's the thing about Victoria too, is she writes very romantic books. Like, and I feel their relationship. A lot of these books, they're like hooking up instantly and it's very just sexual. Like her books feel like they are soulmates. Like they belong together. They have amazing conversations. They communicate together. Like I don't think there was a third act breakup no third act breakup in this. Like it was just very beautiful. So some of the triggers in this is there's a previous essay, attempted essay on another time, PTSD, panic attacks, and there is a lot of self-harm. So not a lot, but she does bring it up because she was self-harming. And that's the thing is I know from like other situations, but like other sex crime or victims of a sex crime, they do self-harm. It's like the only way they can feel like they are in control and to like deal with that emotion because you just have such a bad panic attack and you use that as like a release to get rid of that like feeling. And so I think it's very important like to show that in these books. So she does do some self-harm. So just be aware of that. But I loved this book. So I hope you guys watch, even though I went on way too much about this, like I wasn't going to, but if you watch the buddy read, see what we all think. I'm really nervous. I hope they like it because Victoria even reached out and was like, oh, you want me to join? And I was just nervous to have her join our buddy read if like they didn't like it as much as me. So I loved it. Another 6-star from Victoria Lum. She's had 2 6 stars for me. And I can't recommend this series enough. The first book was good, but all the other 3 books were amazing. So anyways. Okay, so now on to the book that basically took me a week to read. And it is big, and that is Written in My Own Heart's Blood. This is the 8th book in the Outlander series. As you can see, it is thick. I mean, and the writing is tiny. I mean, this took me forever to get through. I think it's like... Oh yeah, so like this one says 800, but it's like super tiny print. I think my ebook for it, because I bought the ebook, I have the physical book, and I got the audiobook, said like 1,100 pages or something. So I don't know. It was long. So I struggled with how I wanted to rate this one because I still think it's great storytelling, amazing writing. I love the characters so much. But I was like frustrated with how long it was and how long it took me. But again, that could also be my slumpy week that I was having and having a difficult time getting through books. So it could be a me problem. But I did decide to settle on 5 stars because so much happens in this book. There's so many POVs. That's the thing is like, I think people struggle with her later books because she has so many POVs in them. It's not just like Jamie and Claire. But I actually appreciated this one, with the side characters. William, kind of, he's like Jamie's, one of his sons, that's all grown up and doesn't know he's Jamie's son and all of that. And he's with Lord John Grey as his father. His storyline always kind of, I'm just kind of about, like, I get kind of bored with his storyline, but I did think he had some interesting stuff go on in this book, and he had a lot of growth that he did, because at the end of the last book, he discovers Jamie's his father, and he's not happy about it. Now, there was a big thing that happened in the previous book. See, I can't really say anything because this is the 8th book in the series, but there was some stuff that went down between, with Claire and Jamie that led to, like, actual cliffhanger that was pretty crazy. That I was pissed off about it in that book. Like, I was mad. But I think I came around to it a little bit more. And then the way they come together in this and have forgiveness and work together and really communicate all their issues and what happened in the previous book. Like, I do think that's amazing. Jamie and Claire are just such a strong couple that have been together for so long, and they're soulmates. And so they really discuss things, and they may not always agree. They may get physical with each other. Like, they're a very passionate couple. So I think that was handled really well in this. I still love the young Ian. He is just, I love him so much. And his like love story in this, expanding and getting married, and just like, it's so beautiful. So, and I actually also liked Roger and Bree's story. Sometimes their storyline just really bugs me, but there was so much going on. It was very suspenseful what they were dealing with. So, I mean, there's a lot of POVs. I mean, Lord John Grey has his stuff going on in this. Like, he goes through hell in this book. So there's a lot. Like, there's a lot that goes on in this. But I do think it was a little long and drawn out. But I think that's what she does. You know, at this point, like, if you don't expect a long, drawn out book from Diana, like, come on. So I decided I was going to give this 5 stars because it's just amazing storytelling, and it's still emotional. That it did kind of leave off on a cliffhanger. So it gave me chills. Like, the end of it actually gave me chills. I was so excited. So anyways, this one was the thing that I was really struggling to try and finish this last week. So I finally did it, and I finally finished it. So hopefully these next couple weeks, I'll be able to actually catch up on my TBR on all the stuff I want to read this month. Okay, so then I had an ALC of Under an Endless Moon by A.L. Jackson. This is the second book in the Moonlit Ridge series. I loved the first one. I gave that one 5 stars. This one I really loved too. I don't think I loved it as much, but I still gave this one 5 stars because I really loved this series. I don't know what it is, but I just love it. And I think it's really, I've just discovered that I love listening to A.L. Jackson audiobooks more than reading them, because even listening to it, it's very poetic prose and that kind of stuff, but it doesn't sound, it sounds better as an audiobook than like when you're reading it. So I would highly recommend her audiobooks. If you didn't fully love her book when you read it, like, I would try and get an audiobook and see if it works better that way, because I've really been enjoying them. But this one is like a brother's best friend. This group of guys, they actually, I think, were like in an MC together, and they're not an MC anymore, but they are kind of have this secret kind of club thing where they go after, they help women in abusive relationships and stuff like that get out, get them secret identities. That's revealed like in the first book. And this is romances between Otto and Raven. And Raven is a sister of the hero from the first book. She actually is living with, because she lived with her brother. Her brother had to get her out of the home at like 9 and kind of join the MC to protect her, because her father abused her brutally, like scarred her, did messed up things to her, locked her up, you know. And so it's just, she went through a lot of trauma. And so she's been living with him forever, but she actually, you know, is just still living with him, but she wants her independence. She wants to grow and, you know, find somebody. She's been crushing and pining after his best friend Otto for years, many, many years. And they're actually mutually pining because he was a little bit older than her. So he, you know, helped her when she was like a kid. But as she grew up, like, he was a very big emotional support for her. Like, he would always, like, they had amazing flashbacks in this book that like make sense. Flashbacks kind of don't always work for me, but the flashbacks in this really helped you realize their characters and their connection. And so you get to see her as she would have these night terrors, and he would go into her room and like hold her and like help her through it. But like as she got older, she was like falling for him. And he started to have inappropriate feelings for her, but felt really guilty about it. And her brother basically told him, like, you better never go there with her. So he's had to kind of like force himself to stay away from her, but he still is like one of her best friends. So I just really love their relationship. There's just a beautiful friends to lovers, and friends to lovers doesn't always work for me, but it was really good in this one. Like, I think it was set up perfectly. But she's been living with her brother, but now he's got his girlfriend. I think they're going to get married soon too. And, you know, his kid. And so she feels kind of like, you know, the third, like, she doesn't belong there. She needs to get her own place. And then, of course, when she walks in on her brother, like, naked having sex with his girlfriend, she's done. And so Otto offers up his place and for her to stay with him till she finds a new place. And so now they're like roommates and they have all this like sexual tension and chemistry. And so, you know, it comes to a point, and what I loved about this was like, they were like really having some close calls, kisses, touching and stuff. And then he would put it off and say, no, we can't do that. And I loved it because this girl is so strong. Like, she's such a strong, feisty, and she goes after what she wants. And she's done waiting. She's done waiting for him. She's waited her whole life, and she tells him how she feels and like is like, this, it's this or nothing. Like, I can't do this anymore. And so I love that moment. And when he is like, finally tells her how he feels. And it was just so beautiful. So I really loved this. Obviously, this is A.L. Jackson. She always has some kind of suspense element. So that will come into play in this. But I really love this series. It just feels like such a perfect little town. Like, I want to live in Moonlit Ridge. And I just love these group of guys. So I'm very excited for the rest of this series. So I ended up giving this one 5 stars and 3 chilies. And this one was narrated by Connor Craze and Desiree Ketchum, and they always do such a great job. It was a really good audiobook. I finished it in a day. I loved it. Okay, so then I read Broken by the Horde King. This is one of my goals this year, was to finally finish this series because I never went back to the series like usual. And this is by Zoey Draven. This is the 4th book in the Horde Kings of Drakkar. And this one took me a while to get through, but I still really loved it. Again, I'm not going to dock anything because of my reading issues these last couple weeks, but I felt like it took me like, I think 3 days to read this, which was crazy for me, but I still really loved it. I think it was such a unique story out of like this series so far. Because like usually the characters don't know each other in their first meeting and stuff like that. But these 2 characters have been friends since they were kids. And it's really like friends to lovers, kind of second chance type of thing. And it has definitely like that. It gave me the vibes of the, you know, rejected, like the Horde, oh, shit. What is it called? The Kate C. Wells, like rejected mate series. Anyways, it was giving me those vibes because in this we have Kieran and Maeva. And Maeva was, she's actually a human, but she was found by, you know, a couple of the people from the Drakkar, and they ended up adopting her. She was like found like out alone in the wilderness. And so they adopt her and raise her as their daughter. And she wants to be a healer, and she's grown up. She was bullied pretty badly because she was the only human there. And she befriends Kieran. He's kind of like almost like the prince of the village. And this isn't like one of those hordes where they're constantly traveling. This is kind of like a community where they stay like at this location. It's on these, it's like kind of like the southern area, but it's the beach. So it's got really cool, interesting vibes. I loved like the beach vibes, and they had their own little secret place like on the cliffs of the beach that they were together. But she's been pining after him for years, and she's in love with him. And so she decides to take her shot, and she gets rejected by him in front of everybody. So that's why I was, Tyrant Alpha's rejected mate. That's what I'm thinking of. So that's what it reminded me of, that, because that chick got rejected in front of everybody and was humiliated. She goes through that kind of same thing, and she still also tries again with him, and he completely shuts her down. And so she feels like he's disgusted by her because she's a human. He's going to be king of his own horde and everything. So he's going to be leaving. And so he, leaves, and she doesn't see him for another 10 years. And it really broke her heart because she was so in love with him, and he completely rejected her. And then like when her mother died, he never came back, even though she asked him to, which that's going to be like figured out later. But so like he comes back 10 years later, and he needs a healer. And so he wants her to be the healer of his horde. So she does agree because she's also not able to become the full healer at their home. This older guy's in it already, and he's going to give it to this other guy. So This is a big thing for her, but she only agrees to do it for like the frost season, and then she wants to go back home. But really, he's back for her because he regrets what he did, and he's been in love with her this entire time. And he realizes that she is his mate and he needs to make her his queen. And so this is a big grovel, and I loved it. Like, this man grovels so good. I do end up getting frustrated with her a little bit because I'm like, dude, like, he's explaining everything and trying to woo her, and she's just so shut down emotionally with him. But it's understandable. So that's just me getting frustrated with a heroine, but she definitely, it's understandable. But I loved their connection, their friendship. They were so perfect together. So I just love this. I love a good grovel, and I'm really excited to continue because they're discovering more about the red mist that's going on. So I absolutely love this. I gave this one 5 stars and 3 chilies. Okay, so the last book I read was the another of the picks for Jen's from the Book Refuge's like book club that she does with Crystal's Bookish Life, and this was It Had to Be a Duke by Vivienne Lorret. This is the first book in the Liars Club, and I have never read Vivienne Lorret, and I'm kind of bummed because the other book I read from the book club was a 2.5 star, and this one is 2. So I did not like this. I didn't hate it as much as the other one, but it was still very, like, it just wasn't great. So I'm going to give this author another chance because I've heard people really love her. I just think it was this book that just wasn't vibing for me. But this is between Magnus and Verity. And Verity is like the 26-year-old spinster, and she hates this girl in town and kind of gets caught in a bad position where she's looking like an idiot. And so she ends up, like, to save face, say she's like engaged, and she brings up his name. And then it happens to be kind of a family too, that her, like a feuding family. There's a big thing between her like father and his father that something bad happened. You don't learn about it till like way later in the book. But supposedly her father was so horrible and evil and betrayed his father. And so he hates their family. But he's trying to get married because he needs more money, and he needs that for advantageous reasons. So he's about to do that. And then all of a sudden this rumor gets back to this guy that he's trying to get his daughter to wed him. And so he has to go there and figure this out with her. And then he realizes he has to like kind of fake be engaged with her so that it like saves face, so he doesn't look bad, like abandoning her immediately. Because the town is very gossipy, and they're all like already talking about what a great, romance these two had. So they basically decide to do this fake engagement, and then they'll end things. But like, it was just so annoying. I gotta tell you, like, I am so over the heroine that's so clumsy and gets herself in these crazy predicaments and is always like falling and being caught in compromising positions, and the hero just save her. Like, it happened over and over and over and over. It was like, we get it. It's like the Bella Swan thing that I hated, like, where it's like the over clumsy, like, heroine that's like awkward. And it drove me nuts. I didn't like the hero. He was mean. He was like a bully. He was rude. So I literally felt no connection between these characters, like nothing, like no connection. And then there's like a third act conflict that I thought was just so dramatic. And then the reveals about what happened with their parents were just thrown in there at the end. And it was just confusing. And it could have been confusing because I checked out. It just dragged on and on and on. And I was bored out of my mind, and I didn't like the heroine. Like, she's supposed to be a 26-year-old spinster, but she came off like a teenager, like very naive and annoying. And he was an asshole. So I just didn't like it. So I feel bad because I literally gave both those books for the book club 2.5 stars. So I don't know. I'm going to give it another chance, but I'm glad I didn't vlog this one for New to Me author because it would have just been me trashing it. So I'm glad I didn't do it. But anyways, those are the books that I read this last 2 weeks. Thank you so much for watching this. I know it's probably going to be a longer video. I ended up rambling more than I wanted to. but that always happens. But thank you so much for watching. Make sure you join the Discord if you want to, you know, check out what's going on. Even if you don't want to join the readathon, I have other stuff you can chat through there. And I hope you join me for the next 2 books, and I'll be posting soon when that live show will be. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys on the next one.